Hi everyone, this is a gamer's wife again, here with my husband, Mr. Gamer, and he is a 20 plus year veteran in the video game industry. And the question of the day is, what kind of education do you need to get into the video game industry, both formal and informal? So let's start with middle school, high school, where maybe you don't know what kind of career you want in the video game industry, but you know you want to make games.
Well, I think the best thing to do in that case is use middle school and high school as a time to explore what you want to do. If you think you might want to be an artist, do a lot of art, draw, do graphics, do stuff online, see what you can make of it. I think that's the same thing really for any of the fields, but you may have a vague idea about wanting to be in video games, but you kind of need to figure out what part of video games you want to do. So I would use that time, to try to find what you want to do with it.
Are there any classes that, I know when you said you were a kid, a lot of times you'd be taking algebra or calculus, and your fundamental question was, what's the point of this? Like, how does it actually apply? So what are some of the classes that you have to take, or optional ones that you have to take in middle school and high school, and how do they actually apply to the video game industry?
Well, it isn't even just the video game industry. I think it's good to have as broad a base as you can. You need to learn about a lot of things. The people who are not as successful in video games are the ones who only reference video games they've played. If you know a lot about the world, if you know a lot about travel, you know about other countries, you know about other cultures, you know about other things, that works its way into everything you do. If you're an artist, you need to know what are the design cues that make something look Aztec or Egyptian or Central European. You need to know those things, or you're just making a lot of stuff out of your head all the time. So again, it's about, I think, especially earlier in school, it's about getting a broad knowledge base and a lot of interests, because that's anything you do, you're going to be helped by in that. Whereas if you stay really narrow and all I do is play video games and then I recreate my favorite games that I've played, you're never going to expand. You're never going to be wide enough to do anything at that point.
So you're saying the more you learn, the more knowledge you have later on when you're creating, which video games can be anything. You have all that knowledge to draw upon and to create hopefully something new and interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to spark creativity if you haven't been exposed to anything. And if all you've done in your life is watch 10 TV shows that you really like and play 10, 20 game series you really like, that's your entire base. And everything you make is going to look like and feel like those things. If you know about architecture, if you know about art, if you know about anything, really, on the art side and design side, it comes down to knowing a lot about a lot. With programming, you need to know a lot about math. You need to have a head for programming. You need to understand that you want to write physics engines, you better know math. On the other hand,
apparently.
yes. And on the other hand, if you're a programmer, you can bring a lot more value to the table by not only knowing math. So I still think that broad knowledge base. A lot of programmers, I've worked with people, the best programmers I worked with were almost like half designers too, because they knew so much. And they brought a lot to everything they did.
Do you need really good grades as a middle school, high schooler to get into the video game industry, or what are we talking about?
I don't think anyone's looking at,
Or is it an awesome portfolio? Like, what to get into a college? We'll talk about that in a second. What do you need?
grades by themselves will not do anything for you other than they need to be good enough.
Right. It opens a lot of doors. If you have higher grades, it's easier to get into things.
Yes. There's a lot of stuff out there that you're kind of behind a wall if you don't have at least the ability to show that you've done this and gotten decent grades. That being said, it's about the work. It's always about the work. We've hired people. We don't. When I was hiring, I never looked at what their GPA was. If they had a great portfolio, if they showed that they could do the work. If you're an artist, if you're a programmer, you're going to have a portfolio of some kind. You're either going to have art or you're going to have projects you program, and you can see creativity and adaptability and improvisation in all those things, that's what makes the difference. Just having good grades, you can have someone who's very mechanical and has churned out good grades, but doesn't have any creativity or doesn't, know how to really craft something cool. So yeah, I mean, grades are important, like anything else. They're important, but I don't think they're the end all be all.
Well, I remember there was a high school girl who approached you and wanted you to look at her art. She was considering a career in art, whether video games or some other type. And you took a look at it, and your recommendation to her was filling out her portfolio so that she would show different kinds of things. I think she was just
Yes.
drawing anime characters. They were mostly like face front on, and you told her,
Yeah, I told her that if you want to work on games, you don't have the luxury of saying, "Oh, I'm only going to work on anime games because that's what interests me." You're going to have to do a lot of things, and the more you have the ability to break out of your mold and do interesting stuff in different kinds of styles, and more to the point, if you know the underlying mechanics well, you're gonna go further. So if you know anatomy and you can draw characters, it's very easy to go and draw a character that's stylized toward anime or stylized toward realism or stylized toward cartoony. If you don't know anatomy, then all you're doing is aping people who have already drawn anime, and if someone asks you to do anything else, you're not going to be able to. So it's very important to be able to, show your work. You need to know a lot about a lot. It's take art classes, take anatomy classes, learn to draw well. If you're a programmer, don't just do physics. Learn about a lot of things. Learn how to do some graphics programming. Do some other things. You don't also know that you're going to like what you start with, because I did art for about 10 years. I aimed at art. I enjoyed it, but ultimately got out of it because I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed design. So if I had not stretched my wings a little bit and tried other things, then I wouldn't have ever known that. I would have been stuck in art forever, and that's not necessarily what you want.
final bit of advice for our middle school and high schoolers out there. Is there anything they should be doing job experience-wise? It's probably pretty hard for them to get a job working at a video game industry. So what is something more obtainable that they should be, getting, again, expanding your horizons?
I would say find anything you can that is volunteer, internship. Help people with projects, especially people at the same level. You'll all figure it out together. So, find a group online that's doing a mod for a game. Offer something. Say, I'll help with your user interface, or I'll draw some icons for you. Anything you can do. That will give you a better insight on working on a project than any amount of schooling will, because school is not there to teach you what it's like to work in the real world. It's a very different environment. And the sooner you break out of that and actually do the kind of work you'd be doing at a job, that just gets you ahead quicker.
How do they find these jobs? Are there online forums or Facebook groups or something dedicated to
Sure. There's
indie developers?
there's forums for every game out there. Find a game you're interested in and find out what the mod scene is for that game. Like, how are they modifying it? What people are making what for it? Maybe they're converting it to some other property. Maybe they're adding more units to a game or more people. There's always something going on in modding, and it's pretty easy to find. There's a giant modding community around bigger games, like especially very moddable ones like Skyrim or something like that.
You had some experience making video games when you were in middle and high school too, right? So what was that like?
I partnered with a few people that were good at what they did. I knew a friend who was a really good programmer, kind of genius level in high school. Knew math inside and out, backwards, forwards, wrote engines for fun. We decided to make a game. It was right about the time that the original Doom came out. He took one look at the project at Doom and said, "Oh, I know exactly what they're doing to get their 3D effect." And he went and wrote an engine over a couple of weekends that was very similar. At that point, we enlisted another guy that we knew as a designer, and he was, at the time, we kind of had him in a story and world building role. And then I was doing the art, and it quickly became apparent, this was before Photoshop and a lot of things were available readily. We needed an art solution. So we stopped, and I went back with my friend who's a programmer. We wrote a paint program.
Wow.
To allow me to make the art the way we wanted to for the game. And we started making a game. We had a world, we had a story, we started making test levels. I was populating with graphics, doing, wall textures and all that kind of stuff. And we got pretty far into that project, at which point we graduated from high school, and so we kind of all went our separate ways. We never really finished it. But it was invaluable experience because we were actually solving real problems like a game studio instead of just dreaming about it. It wasn't like a school type thing. It was a real, we've got to have this done by this time.
So you're talking about schedules,
right?
Working together as a team, those kind of intangibles
Yeah.
that sometimes you don't get from school.
Yeah, and trying something and going, no, this doesn't work at all. I need to find a new way to do it because I'm out of time.
Troubleshooting.
A lot of that kind of thing. It was very valuable, and I recommend to anyone do that. Find somebody that has common interests, and instead of just playing the games and consuming them, like try to do something. It's easier than ever now, because there are so many free engines out there you can grab. You can do grab Unity, and it does a lot of things for you. And if you're not making a certain amount of money with your projects, it's free, so you can grab that and play with it. The first game I actually developed ever was when I was 14. I did a game completely by myself because I managed to get an engine to kind of make 2D games, tile-based type stuff, and I was able to make a shooter, like a top-down shooter. I did all the graphics, all the animation, all the sound, everything. That was probably what started me on the path, because then I kind of knew it could be done. I actually finished a game, which was pretty cool, and that's what led to the high school thing happening. So I would just say, find a way to start doing what you're talking about. Find a way to start doing what you love. Don't just dream about it or play a lot of games and wish. Like, go make something.
Yeah, I think you can definitely Google for resources, especially specifically geared at kids. I know MIT has a tool that is to let you make your own game. All right, let's switch gears now for the second half of our program to talk about college. So I know this is going to be different depending on what career you want to pursue in video games, but what are the degrees that you should be looking at, and then how do you find an institution or a college for them?
Well, out of the 4 kind of main areas in games, there's art, programming, design, production. Out of those, it's pretty straightforward. If you want to be an artist, be an artist. You don't necessarily need a degree, but you will learn a lot of stuff that you can't get anywhere else from college. If you take hardcore drawing classes, painting classes, color theory classes, those are all very useful. So I think with art, you can take or leave a degree. One of the best people I've ever worked with had no degree at all. He was a self-taught artist. I've known other people that had very expensive and impressive art degrees who were just as good. So I think you can go that route any way you want with art. You can kind of pick whatever works for you. Programming, you need a computer science degree, and it's even better if you can specialize, like kind of narrow down what you want to be in, because if you want to hit the heights on programming, you have to start early and kind of know what you're doing. So if you want to code engines, that's a totally different thing than doing graphics work or doing back-end database stuff, or there's just a lot of different things you can do in programming. So a computer science degree is a great way to go there, and then you can probably find a specialty. You can go into physics, you can go into logic and other things. With designers, I think real-world experience is more important. You can get game design degrees. I think they're getting better, but the best people who become designers are usually designers when they're kids. They are making their own games, they're creative, they're finding ways to fix things, they're tearing things apart, putting them back together. They're learning how to make systems. Like, designers come out of playing role-playing games, playing Lego, telling stories, a lot of that kind of stuff. And with design, you can kind of lean 2 ways, which is world building and writing, or kind of more systems design.
So most of the designers that you interviewed, what kind of range of degrees did they have?
Anything. A lot of them had liberal arts degrees. A lot of them had programming degrees. A lot of designers come from programming because they already have a systemized approach to thinking, and then they just want to do the more fun stuff instead of, put the semicolon in the right place all day. So we got a lot of people that transferred into design. A lot of designers start in other fields and then come into design. That's what I did. I started in art. I think degree is probably not as important as design. I think it's what you do and whether you have a head for it or not. And then when you get to production, that's almost all business. And it's one thing I think the games industry needs is more trained business people. What tends to happen in games is that, oh, you've got an artist and he's really good, so you promote him, and then you give him, oh, well, now he's going to be a department lead, and he's going to have 2 people under him, 3 people under him. Then he becomes, an art director. But then you have the problem that person has never had management training. They've only been an artist, and because you have to promote them, the only way to promote them is into management. And that's not always a good fit. Some of the worst managers I've ever had came up through the ranks. So I think it's good to get real business people that have MBAs or other kind of business degrees, and then they go into games and they can bring some of that knowledge into games, because there's a big weakness there right now.
So for colleges, how do you recommend like a normal college that has, degrees like for nursing and stuff like that? Or do you recommend colleges that are geared specifically only for video game careers?
In general, I tend to tell people to avoid the schools that teach video gaming, that have video game degrees. In general, you do not get what you pay for with those. I would say the exception is Full Sail. I worked at a lot of places. Full Sail's expensive, but it does actually teach you what you need to know, and people get jobs. Several studios I've been at hired out of Full Sail and had really good people come through. A lot of the other schools are not great. They will take your money, they will teach you how to use software, but not teach you any of the reasons why you're doing what you're doing. So I would avoid that in general.
So what should people do during the summertime then? Is it possible to get work experience or an internship of some kind?
It's possible, and by all means, if you can find an internship, take it. I think you're just as well off starting to find people who work in games and talk to them about what to do. So I would say, like, if there's no time like the present. Make some stuff. Join a group that's making games. Find some people that are interested in it, that want to do it. Make something that lasts. Try it out. I think that's the best thing you could do with your summer, basically.
So you're saying if you can't get an internship, which it sounds like it's super competitive, the next best thing is to really work on your portfolio and do things that video game employers would want to see.
Yeah, pretty much.
Any final advice for kids, college students who want to get into the video game industry? What can they do to make their resume look better? What can they do to make their case them look better in the job interview, basically?
Make stuff. Make stuff. Don't think about making stuff. Don't overthink making stuff. Make a lot of things. Put a portfolio together. You also have to know what you're making and why. When I was in college, I went to a college that had a computer graphics degree program. The professors wanted everyone to make little bite-sized animations and little bite-sized projects all the time. They were always due. A couple weeks down the road, you have a couple weeks, 3 weeks to make one. I realized very early on that's not going to get me jobs in the video game industry. I don't want to have a bunch of little spinning characters as my resume. So what I did instead is I plotted out a story, and I made a 4 or 5 minute animation over the course of like 2 semesters. And I built very intricate, large sets. I researched how I was going to light them, how I was going to do special effects. I made characters and animated the characters within them. And my professor actually gave me a lot of trouble for that. He said I wasn't listening to what he was telling me to do. He always complained. He was like always joking, like, oh, he's the guy that is going to spend a year and a half making one animation. Well, when I got out of school, I got hired at a game studio in their art department. And when I was hired, the hiring manager told me we had individual animations and projects that came in on other resumes that were better than yours from an individual standpoint. This guy has better characters, this guy has better whatever. But the reason we hired you is because you put it all together, you did everything, and you put it together into a story. And that's what was important. Telling the story was more important than just spending a million years detailing a character's nose and making it look perfect. That wasn't actually what got me ahead. What got me ahead was having the big picture. What do I want to do? And so that's what I did. I built that thing, and I put it out there, and it got me a job. And I didn't listen to the people who were always trying to tell me that I was doing it wrong or that I didn't know what I was doing. I knew what I wanted to achieve, and I wanted to do cinematics in video games, and so I made a cinematic, and I got a job in cinematics.
So you're basically saying, instead of doing the class project as prescribed, you use that time to create a giant demo reel that was super impressive, super cohesive, yes. And you could still turn into the professor along the way.
At the end of the day, nobody cares what you did in school. They want to see work. And I saw that as my opportunity to make something cool and put it out there. And a lot of the people that I went to school with who did everything the professors wanted them to do and checked off every box and did exactly what they wanted didn't end up getting jobs in the game industry. They ended up in other fields doing little motion graphic stuff or other things. And I knew this is what I needed to do to get in games. So trust your gut and, shoot for the stars. Don't just do what's expected of you or what people are telling you, because they're not going to know exactly what you need to do to get into what you want to do. You need to know that for yourself, and you need to aim at it and hit that goal.
That's good. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and hope you'll join us again next time. See you guys later. Bye.